On Sunday night, November 22nd, 1987, residents of Chicago were sitting down to watch the local news on WGN TV when a report about the Chicago Bears was suddenly interrupted by a mysterious video. The video had no audio and only depicted a man in a Max Headroom mask. After the interruption stopped, the anchor, Dan Roan, had this to say.
Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I.
Max Headroom, as I'm assuming some of you don't know, is a character who was supposed to be the world's first computer-generated TV host.
Headroom. Max Headroom.
He was a very popular character around the time this happened, and it's safe to assume that most of the audience recognized him. And this would not be the last appearance of the man with the Max Headroom mask that night. A few hours later, a broadcast of Doctor Who on WTTW TV in Chicago was also interrupted by the hacker. And this time there was audio.
I'll get you a hot drink, miss.
Some dry clothes.
Because he's a freaking nerd. I think I'm better than Chuck Swirsky. Freaking muffled.
The Chuck Swirsky that he's talking about is a sportscaster for WGN TV, who you might remember was the first station that got hacked.
Oh, Jesus. That's the way.
At the time of this hack, the real Max Headroom was the spokesperson for the new Coke.
Catch the wave. Coke.
Note that the song he's singing here is the theme song from an old cartoon called Clutch Cargo.
Clutch Cargo with his pals Spinner and Paddlefoot in another exciting adventure, Pirate Isle. Ooga-looga, Clutch Cargo.
Ooga-looga to you, Snowshoe.
The Max Headroom signal intrusion incident quickly became national news, and the FCC was immediately on the case. I know a lot of people think of the FCC as the organization whose job it is to keep dirty words off of TV, but really, their job is to protect the integrity of the airwaves in situations such as this. And they were pretty confident that they would catch the person behind the Max Headroom hacking.
But the odds, I'd say, if a guy continues to involve himself, either sporadically or continuously, it's very great that we will determine who it is.
They've done it before, and signal intrusions like the Max Headroom one were nothing new. Just a year earlier, a hacker calling himself Captain Midnight had interrupted HBO's broadcast and displayed this message in protest of HBO's new price hikes. They quickly figured out that he was actually an engineer named John McDougal, and he was promptly arrested. But the difference here, and a big reason why the Max Headroom incident continues to capture people's imaginations, is that 30 plus years later, he still hasn't been caught. But there are a few suspects. The first theory about a Max Headroom suspect claims that it was a musician named Erik Fournier behind the hack. The primary piece of evidence that people use to tie these two together are the aesthetic similarities between the Max Headroom video and a video series created by Eric. This series stars a character called Shaye Saint John, and he had a few standalone movies for it, as well as some videos that were kind of popular in the early days of YouTube. Unfortunately, his original channel was deleted by YouTube, a big surprise there, but the videos that do remain do reveal a kind of similarity.
Susan, yes, forget it. She does Ron John tell me the drip drop diet that I'm doing down in Hollywood. 2 drops for 2 pounds. Yeah, I'm doing the drip drop diet. 2 drops, 2 pounds.
According to Vice Motherboard, the Erik Fournier theory is as follows. The legend is that Eric, who lived in nearby Bloomington, Indiana at the time and played in a punk band called the Blood Farmers, simply wanted exposure for his band's music videos. At the last minute, he decided to ditch the idea of broadcasting one of their videos out of fear that they would be identified and reverted instead to his own spontaneous performance. The idea that Eric reverted to a spontaneous performance, to me, contradicts what we see in the actual video. The Max Headroom video could obviously not have been performed live, as there's a very clear cut when they jumped to the spanking scene. Or as this newscaster referred to the scene,
a portion of his or her anatomy.
A portion of his anatomy. I'm so glad TV's dying. Another piece of evidence contradicting this theory is that one of Eric's former bandmates said that none of them ever went to Chicago. They didn't have the technical knowledge required to pull this off, and even if they didn't have any music videos to play at all. And unfortunately, Eric himself isn't able to deny this theory as he passed away in 2010, leaving behind the mystery and his creepy artwork. But the same year Eric passed away, another set of suspects emerged. In a Reddit post made in 2010, a user named B-Pogue claimed that he might know who did it. In this post, B-Pogue told the story of two brothers who he nicknamed J and K so as not to potentially reveal their identities to the FCC or anyone who might still want to prosecute them for this crime. J and K were two brothers who were deeply involved in Chicago's local hacking and phreaking scene in the 80s and 90s. Having an interest in this but being significantly younger, B-Pogue was a bit of a hanger-on in the scene. Although he mostly communicated with these people through dial-up bulletin board services, there were a few occasions where they would meet up in real life. And it was one of these real-life meetups that might have potentially exposed the person behind the Max Headroom hackings. One of these get-togethers was in an apartment in a town called La Grange, a suburb of Chicago, in the winter of 1987. Kay lived in a shared apartment with his girlfriend along with a roommate, also a fellow hacker, who we'll refer to as M. Practically every square inch, with the exception of one corner, was packed with systems working and some apparently non-working. Anyway, the apartment was located in a rather rundown-looking apartment high-rise, maybe 4 to 5 stories tall, located within walking distance of a Pizza Hut. We all walked over there and did lunch and dinner there that day. Before he gets into the details of what was said that day, he explains why he believes that Jay was the man behind the mask. The first point he says is that Jay had the same sense of humor as the guy in the video. Jay, despite having fairly severe autism and coming off as basically crazy, was actually kind of funny. His sense of humor was sort of disturbing, sort of sexually deviant in nature. Although it's circumstantial, this is the first bit of evidence I have. The Max Headroom video features a guy who at one point holds up what appears to be a vibrator or a dildo, or as the reporter would say,
the display of a marital aid.
The end of the video shows a woman dressed up like Annie Oakley swatting someone's bare ass with a fly swatter. This is the sort of humor that Jay loved. All of his jokes constantly involved something childish and or sexually deviant. The video, for all intents and purposes, is a perfect reflection of Jay's sense of humor, scattered, nervous, and comically sexually deviant. But it wasn't just the sense of humor, it was also the speaking patterns that B-Pogue said resembled Jay's. Here's an example of a conversation he gave to demonstrate this. Hey Jay, how old are you anyway? Oh, do you know why I told you not to sit in the front seat? Why? Oh, in case you said something stupid. What do you mean? There's a surprise under the seat for people who say something stupid. Oh, if you say something stupid, huh? What TV shows do you watch? I don't really watch TV. Hey, I'm hungry. Ooh, I hope you don't say something stupid. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that Jay often jumped around randomly back and forth to different subjects when he talked. He never really kept a clear line of conversation. This brings us to the next bit of circumstantial evidence. If you watch the video, the person behind the mask jumps around in exactly the same way as Jay. The problem is, I never spoke with Jay for anything other than that ride home, but the way he spoke was in line with the type of verbal mannerisms of the guy in the mask. Where most people would say, in conversation, Jay said, oh, in various lengths. Oh, if he struggled to find something to say. Another small circumstantial piece of evidence was the Clutch Cargo connection. It's a minor point, but Clutch Cargo would have also been contemporaneous to Jay's childhood. Clutch Cargo was an early 60s cartoon. Only someone born in the 50s would have been able to sing the theme song. If Jay was about 30 at the time, 1987, then this would make sense. But as B-Pogue said, this is all circumstantial evidence. The real smoking gun in this case was something a lot more substantial. Jay was at the party in the apartment that afternoon. I didn't talk with him directly. Me and the friend of mine that I was there with didn't really talk to anybody that day, but I did overhear what the others were talking about. They were referring to Jay planning to do something big over the weekend. I remember that word, big, because it piqued my curiosity as to what might be considered big by their standards. I later asked them collectively during the dinner we all had at Pizza Hut later that night what they were talking about earlier, what big was. and someone, probably Kay, told me to just watch Channel 11 later that night, as sort of an offhanded suggestion. I did happen to be watching Channel 11 later that night, having forgotten about the whole big conversation earlier that day. I saw it, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together at the time. So putting all this together, B. Pogue said that it was his belief that Jay was Max Headroom, Kay was the cameraman, and Kay's girlfriend was the girl with the fly swatter. 3 years later, another Redditor named Animosity came forward to corroborate some of the details of B. Pogue's story. So do you think those two brothers did it? The TLDR version is yes, I do. Here's the long version. In 1987, I was 16 and D-Dial BBS were coming to a slow close. These guys were part of the local BBS D-Dial scene, which is how I knew them. I was kind of interested in their roomie as a potential hookup and drove to the apartment a time or two to hang out. I remember seeing heavy-duty AV equipment there, but I had no idea what it was used for and no one was interested in enlightening me. After the broadcast was broken into, word was going around the D-Dial scene about who did it. Fingers were being pointed at the guys living in the apartment. Of course it was all deny because of the deep shit they got themselves into, and no one ratted anyone out. So it really seemed like B. Pogue was onto something, and other locals of Chicago who were familiar with the scene agreed with him. But in October of 2015, B. Pogue came with yet another update that twisted the story in another direction. In the time since his last update, B. Pogue had become acquainted with Rick Klein, who was the curator of the Museum of Classic Chicago Television. Together, they came in contact with people close to the situation who were able to shine new light on it. Several weeks ago, Rick and I had the luxury of meeting and speaking with several engineers and technicians who were actively working for WBBM, WTTW, WGN, and other companies in the Chicago broadcasting community at the time. They yielded a wealth of very detailed information, including specifics about what kind of locations, gear, physical access, and more importantly, what sort of station-specific knowledge would have been necessary in order to pull off the intrusions themselves. This was the kind of heavy engineering perspective knowledge that we had only had bits and pieces to work with before and had been trying to obtain for some time and with great difficulty. After the last round of interviews and having looked at the resulting evidence pile in total, Rick and I have concluded that the possibility of this having been an outside job is basically zero. To make a long story short, all the things which needed to have been possessed by an outside amateur or amateurs, no matter how talented, simply did not exist in the wild in 1987. This, and other information we are never able to corroborate, is what allows us to free J and K as suspects with full confidence. If the information they gained is true and J and K can't possibly be the suspects, this means that it had to be a job performed by someone who was in the Chicago broadcasting community. They had to have had both the knowledge necessary and access to the professional equipment to pull off the hack. So if I had to take a shot in the dark and guess, I would think that the person responsible for the hack was a broadcaster who had some kind of personal vendetta with Chuck Swirsky, who he said that he was better than, or perhaps WGN TV itself, which he referred to as world's greatest newspaper nerds. Some sort of professional jealousy or rivalry is the only thing I can think of at this point. It's either that or maybe they just did it for the lulz. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other one about a mysterious hard drive. Thanks for watching, I'm out of here.